It's time for our Ultimate Rankings for Week 10. If you enjoy the Ultimate Rankings, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed if you play fantasy football. But let's go to the running backs first. It's going to be a big S tier and a big A tier this week for the running backs. Lots of these running backs have good matchups this week, but we'll start in the S tier with Saquon Barkley up against the Cowboys, Derrick Henry up against the Bengals, Kyren Williams having the Dolphins this week, Bijan jumps back up, he's playing the Saints this week, and then Devon Achane is going to be in this tier as well with the Rams. You've seen Devon Achane since Tua has come back. He has been far more productive than he was without Tua. This is what we expected, and there really is no reason to have him outside of the S tier in any week, given what we've seen in the sample size so far. As far as the other guys go, Kyren playing in a high-scoring game, Derrick Henry playing a high-scoring game. Really the toughest matchup in terms of over-under on this list is going to be the Eagles-Cowboys game, and it's going to be Saquon. But again, it's Saquon Barkley, and he can reverse hurdle people, so there's going to be no reason to not start him. So all these guys are guys you're starting every week at this point. But a couple of changes just with some guys jumping back up into this S tier.
Yep, and the A tier is going to be extensive this week. It's going to be pretty big. You got Mixon up top. Mixon is going to be around this range, maybe even S tier some weeks as well, just because he is one of the last men standing. Nico going to come back healthy sooner rather than later, we hope. But Mixon is really their top option there in that offense. He's the most consistent. He's phenomenal. You got guys like Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, all pretty consistent with their workload. Breece Hall is very inconsistent, but he has a good matchup against Arizona this week. And then Christian McCaffrey is going to be the highlight of this week. Obviously, he's going to be on a snap count in his first game back, but it doesn't matter. You're starting Christian McCaffrey regardless, and he could drop 20 with 15 touches tops. He could drop 20 with 10 touches. So Aaron Jones is going to be at the tail end of this tier as well. He has another really good matchup. He's been underwhelming the last few weeks, but he's got a nice floor of like 10, 11 points without a touchdown. Like most people are, you're going to be touchdown dependent when you're looking for some of those big explosive weeks. Aaron Jones just hasn't gotten the ball in the end zone despite getting some red zone opportunities. So very similar to Josh Jacobs, where we're just kind of we're holding true with our take on Aaron Jones. I think he's going to be fine rest of the season, especially against Jacksonville.
Let's jump down here to the B tier. Let's talk about DeAndre Swift playing the Pats this week. It's a good matchup for him. The Pats giving up the 5th most points to running backs this year. James Cook playing the Colts. Obviously, any team playing the Colts is going to be a good matchup. And James Cook, although Ray Davis has been productive, James Cook is still the lead back there. Tyrone Tracy has the best matchup of the week going up against the Panthers. The over-under line is pretty low, 41.5 total points. But the Panthers have given up the most points to running backs this year in fantasy football, so he's going to be somebody you're absolutely starting. James Conner against the Jets, tougher matchup, but James Conner continues to get enough volume. It's probably not going to matter a whole lot. J.K. Dobbins playing the Titans, tougher matchup for J.K. Dobbins as well, but he's been productive through that. Obviously, Pollard on the other side of that matchup playing the Chargers. The Chargers have allowed the second least amount of points this year to running backs, but again, you have seen Tony Pollard, similar to James Conner, get every single touch in that offense, and so he's just going to still have touchdown upside, so he'll be a low-end running back too for us this week. Monty playing the Texans. The Texans have been very good against the run as well, especially for fantasy purposes. The third least amount of points to running backs this year. But David Montgomery, again, he's another guy that's going to have high touchdown upside. Kareem Hunt continues to get a very high volume in that backfield. They play the Broncos this week. The Broncos' pass defense is very good. Their run defense for fantasy purposes isn't that great. So he's going to be up here in the B tier as well.
Yeah. B-Rob, we expect to be back healthy this week going up against Pittsburgh. That's a tougher matchup, and B-Rob has a very cap ceiling, so he will be at the top of the C tier. Chase Brown coming off a 24-point game. He's got another good matchup against Baltimore. Obviously, news comes out that Zach Moss is probably going to miss the remainder of the season, and since he goes out of their way to go trade for Khalil Herbert, I personally am not concerned about Khalil Herbert taking away from Chase Brown's workload and his ceiling or anything, seriously. Like he's going to be second to Chase Brown, and barring injury, Chase Brown is going to be the top option there pretty consistently week in and week out. Ramondre had another great game. He's just so inconsistent. You can't trust him on a weekly basis. Chicago's going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup. And then you've got Najee and Rachaad White at the end here. Najee is going to get more consistent work. Rachaad White going to be a bit more touchdown dependent. Bucky Irving still got many more touches than Rachaad White did against Kansas City on Monday night, but Rachaad White is the one that's scoring the fantasy points. So it's kind of tough to figure out what to do with both of these guys. We will give Rachaad White the nod this week going up against San Fran.
Let's go down to the D tier here. It's a smaller tier. We'll start with Rico Dowdle, who has been productive. However, he does face a tough matchup against the Eagles. Another tough matchup, Travis Etienne playing the Vikings. Another tough matchup, Javonte Williams playing the Chiefs. All three of these teams are in the top 5 of fantasy defense against running backs. So these are tough matchups all across the board here. Not to mention Javonte Williams moves down here quite a bit because you do have reports reports of him losing some work to Audric Estime, and so we're going to keep an eye on that and move Javonte down and temper our expectations this week. Chuba Hubbard is going to be here. He's going to be a little bit lower than normal. It's not a bad matchup, but you do have Jonathan Brooks potentially coming back, so we're going to rank them accordingly. We're going to rank Brooks below Hubbard, but we are going to bump Hubbard down just in case he vultures any carries there. Bucky Irving continues to kind of be not in a place where you're very comfortable starting him. He has a decent matchup this week against the 49ers, but it doesn't really matter because, again, Rachaad White has proven to be the more fantasy productive back in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure that's going to change the rest of the season with the receivers being out because Rachaad White does boast some receiving upside in that offense as well.
Tyler Algier is still getting carries even with Bijan being as productive as he's been the last month. He was able to vulture another touchdown this week against Dallas. He's again is kind of just a streamable option if you have to start him. You can. Jonathan Brooks, Tank Bigsby, Ray Davis, Jalen Moore, and Austin Eckler, all the same story. They're all backups to top running backs or number one running backs, and given a occurrence where there's an injury in front of them or they're able to get some red zone opportunity, if you're forced to flex them, maybe they can do something this week. So nothing super pretty in this tier.
Yeah, and then let's go down here to the G tier, and it's going to be Mostert, Braylon Allen, Jordan Mason, Devin Singletary, and then last we're going to have Isaac Guerrero on here just in case you want a Jordan Mason or Christian McCaffrey doesn't get a ton of snaps. But all of these guys, again, are guys that you really don't want to be starting. Mostert, you saw him be particularly disappointing after a week where he actually got some red zone touches. He did have 10 touches in his last game, which is great, but he only had 8 points. It's still 2 receptions for 32 yards. I don't think he's out of the realm of possibility of being productive at some point this year, but for now, we're going to have to rank him here at the end. So let's jump over to wide receivers now. I'll start in the S tier. We got J. Jeff, we got Jamar Chase, and we got Amon-Ra St. Brown. All three of these guys have really good matchups. J. Jeff has the Jags, 5th most points to running back or so to wide receivers this year. Jamar Chase has the Baltimore Ravens, most points to wide receivers this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown has the Texans, 6th most points to wide receivers this year. So all three of these guys have really good matchups, really high Vegas lines. These guys, you get dream matchups for if you drafted these guys because they're going to pop off this week most likely.
A tier was a little tougher this week because you've got some injuries, you've got some questionable matchups. AJ Brown banged up after last week. Drake London with that hip pointer. You've got CeeDee Lamb in this tier as well, who has that AC joint sprain, so he's going to be questionable. Not to mention Cooper Rush is going to be playing for the foreseeable future at quarterback for Dallas because Dak is expected to potentially go on to IR with that hamstring injury. Then you got Puka coming off of a nice knockout punch in the game that kicked him out of the game, and he's got a tougher matchup against Miami. So every single one of these guys has, S tier potential any given week, but given their situations, injuries, and whatnot, every single one of these guys is going to be in the A tier. That's why it's so extensive. Tyreek Hill, I know, has been disappointing the last couple of weeks. He's got a really friendly matchup against the Rams this week. If he's going to get back on track, this is the week for it to happen because there really is nothing keeping him from being ultra productive outside of, I guess, Devon Achane going nuclear again. But even then, it's just no excuse. Tyreek needs to produce.
Yeah. Let's go down to the beach here. We'll start with Terry. He's playing the Steelers this week. Terry's just been straight up productive this year. In fact, fun fact, Terry McLaurin on the year is the wide receiver 7. So pretty impressive for Terry McLaurin. He has a decent matchup. The Steelers are on a bad matchup for wide receivers. They are for running backs. Tank Dell playing the Lions has one of the best matchups of the week and the best matchup in this tier. The Lions have given up the 3rd most points to wide receivers this year. And Tank Dell, obviously, without Stephon Diggs, he projects a lot better. Cooper Kupp against the Dolphins. You saw the Dolphins obviously are not giving up a lot of points right now. They're the 3rd toughest matchup for wide receivers this year in fantasy football. However, Cooper Kupp did have, I think, 22 points in his last game. It was 21.4 points, 14 targets, 11 receptions. So Cooper Kupp, I think, rest of the season when Puka is going to be a little bit on the fence in terms of his health, and obviously we don't expect him to punch everybody or punch somebody every week. I think he is going to be somebody that you need to start. Zay Flowers is a top 12 wide receiver this year. He's continuing to get the target volume. He's not really touchdown dependent. He's a must start right now in all your fantasy leagues. Devontae Adams had a 22-point game last week for the Jets. He's getting a lot of targets, so we like that. Devonta Smith playing the Cowboys. Decent matchup for him, and then Deebo Samuel playing the Buccaneers. And with Deebo, again, being the lead wide receiver there, he will have Christian McCaffrey coming back, but I do think that's going to help Deebo out a little bit. Yeah. So
Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be at the top of the C tier. The reason he's not in the tier above is because the last month he's the target volume hasn't been like anything crazy like the guys above him. 6, 5-4 and 4 targets. Again, he's so explosive and he's so efficient with his opportunities that he can have 20-plus points any given week. But he's been a little boom bust over the last month, so he will be at the top of the seats here. Similar to George Pickens, who just needs to stop getting touchdowns called back, please. He's got a decent matchup against Washington this week. I think he'll be fine with Russ, who's providing plenty of volume. Marvin Harrison Jr., hit or miss, very similar to Brian Thomas. D-Hop, want to touch on him because we're going to be conservative with his ranking this week, ranking him, I think, at like 21st overall in our wide receiver rankings, because even though he's coming off of a 2-touchdown game against Tampa, he's got a tougher matchup against Denver, and no one is going to be surprised by D-Hop anymore defensively. He's matched up against Pat Surtain, and you've got Kareem Hunt, who is getting like 30 carries. Travis Kelce got a ridiculous amount of targets last week. D-Hop might come back to earth a little bit this week. We still expect him to be productive. That's why he's our wide receiver 21 this week, but probably not expecting a nuclear week like he did on Monday Night Football. So Josh Downs, T. Higgins, Darnell Mooney, any given week, they can go crazy. T. Higgins just needs to stay healthy. Darnell Mooney might be the primary beneficiary if Drake London is not a go this weekend. But with Josh Downs still got 9 targets, only 12 points in a tougher matchup where Flacco was being pressured all day. Brian Flores is ridiculous, but Downs we still expect to be productive rest of season.
Let's go to the D tier now. We'll start with Cortland Sutton here playing the Kansas City Chiefs. Cortland Sutton has been sneaky productive the last couple of weeks. And sneaky productive on the season. He's just kind of hit or miss. He's the wide receiver 22 now, though. 23 points and 17 points in each of his last 2 games. However, the Kansas City Chiefs are the worst matchup for wide receivers in the NFL this year. So that is a bad matchup for him. That's why we're going to be conservative with his ranking. Chris Olave playing the Falcons. Probably. I don't know if Chris Olave is going to be back, honestly.
I don't know if he will either.
We'll rank him here, but if he plays, I think he's going to see a pretty good dip in production.
Yeah.
Addison playing the Jags. Addison had a pretty good week last week as well, and so he's going to continue to have touchdown upside, I think. The Jags have given up the 5th most points to wide receivers this year. Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir will rank back-to-back, both in pretty good matchups with the Colts. Colts have allowed the 11th most points to wide receivers this year, and their secondary sucks. It's 47 is the total points line. So with Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir obviously going to jump up if Amari Cooper doesn't play this week. And Amari Cooper, if he does play, you can expect him to be a flexible option. And then J-Mo projects to be back this week. It's a pretty good matchup for J-Mo, honestly, so we're going to put him
One
here.
of the better ones.
We're going to put him here as a wide receiver 3. Honestly, he has wide receiver 2 to low and wide receiver 1 upside if he does end up catching a long touchdown like he tends to do. So he's going to be the last guy here.
Yep. Then the F tier, we're going to have Ridley and McConkey up top. Ridley is still continuing to get a ton of volume from Mason Rudolph. It's a horrible situation, a horrible offense. Lab McConkey, again, came down to earth after a really, really great game in week 9. He is going to be, it's going to be tough against Tennessee for him to be ultra productive. If anything, I think I would expect the running backs to be a little more productive there. I could be wrong, but it's just tough to put up points against Tennessee, who allowed the 28th amount of fantasy points for wide receivers this season. So DJ Moore, he's just continuing to fall down our rankings. He can't do anything. Xavier Legette is continuing to move up our rankings slightly because he's just a consistent red zone threat, which is great for him. And Bryce Young actually didn't look like the worst quarterback in the league last week. Jalen Waddle going to keep falling down. Keon Coleman is playing the Colts. You can make an argument to bump him up a little bit if you wanted to. I would totally understand. It just is going to depend, again, very similar to Jameson Williams. If he can get a big play, if he can get a touchdown, he's not going to get a ridiculous amount of target volume like Shakir and or Amari Cooper if Amari Cooper is healthy this week. But he still has a good chance to be productive in a friendly matchup.
Let's go to the G tier. Keenan Allen's going to be at the top here. Keenan Allen continues to get targets, but not really do a lot with them, so he's honestly a bad flex at this point. I think Rashad Bateman's a guy that a lot of people are tentative to start, but is the wide receiver 32 on the year. However, the last couple games he's only combined for 8 points, so we're going to keep him fairly conservative here. Darius Slayton, I think he did come off the field with an injury. I don't remember if he came back in that game. He is questionable, but he did have 9 points after a 14-point game the week before against Pittsburgh, so he does continue to be a somewhat streamable option in fantasy football. Rome Odunze is going to be playing the Patriots this week. Rome Odunze had 15 points last week, so maybe he's getting a little bit. He's actually been he was more productive last week than DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, so we'll see. Michael Pittman, there's not a lot to say here, and it's a tough matchup. Pittman just hasn't been productive this year. Ray McLeod.
He's hurt too.
Do what?
He's just playing through that back injury, and he
and
looks like he wants to die
away.
every time he.
Wow.
Like,
and with the hospital balls he's being thrown, he almost is going to die.
Yeah.
Like, he's getting crushed.
Yeah.
Ray McLeod, he gets a bump because we don't know if Drake London is going to play this week. We did rank Drake London, but we are going to rank Ray as a possible streaming option if Drake London is out. Wandale continues to, be a little bit hit or miss, and most of his points are coming in PPR leagues. And then Quentin Johnson, and this is a touchdown-dependent guy, but he's playing the Titans this week. It's a tough matchup. I honestly still not super comfortable starting QJ, especially in this matchup, but he is somebody you have to keep an eye on the rest of the season.
Yeah, then H tier is going to be small here, just a bunch of last resort guys. Xavier Worthy, who may be the main beneficiary of D-Hop going off last week. Maybe it opens up the field for him to have a couple of explosive opportunities. Going to be tough against Denver. Michael Wilson, Demario Douglas coming off a 10-point game. He's got Chicago this week, another tough matchup. That's 2 back-to-back matchups for Demario Douglas, where I don't think he has a ton of ridiculous upside. Parker Washington had like a 7-8 point game. He got some decent target volume. It just, you can't trust him or can't trust that offense, period, even though they're going against Minnesota. Ricky Pearsall, with Debo coming back healthy and CMC coming back healthy, that offense starting to look like they're going to be on the up heading into the end of the season. Ricky Pearsall is going to be, by default, the 4th option again in that offense. So I just don't really trust that, and he's going to be the last streamable option that you could potentially start if you absolutely had to with injuries and bye weeks.
All right, let's go to tight ends now. Let's talk about George Kittle, Travis Kelce, and Trey McBride. The 3 guys in the S tier here, both of them have been very good. Travis Kelce had a very good showing this week, and he continues to be a really high target, high volume option without Rashee Rice in that offense. D-Hop as well, obviously getting a boost. But all 3 of these guys are guys that you feel pretty comfortable having on a week where you have Brock Bowers on a bye. So.
Yeah. Then the A tier, we're going to have Ingram and Otten at the top. Ingram has a great matchup against the Vikings. He's gotten some great target volume here. Cade Otten, honestly, Cade Otten at this point, you could make an argument to potentially put him in the S tier. Again, we're going to be conservative for one more week, see what he does against San Francisco. But, dude, he's a top receiving option there for Baker Mayfield, and 2 back-to-back 20-plus point games. He's been ridiculous. Kyle Pitts also in this tier. Not as consistent, not nearly as consistent. He still has explosive playability. He's being on the field less and less, and he's going to continue to fall down to rankings. Ferguson gets a bump up this week, not because of the matchup. Philly's a little bit tougher, but because Cooper Rush is going to be the quarterback there. Ferguson's going to get a decent amount of work because he is going to be one of the easier targets for a backup quarterback to get the ball to. Tight ends generally are, so expect that to be a possibility.
Dropping down the beats here, we're going to start with Mark Andrews. On one hand, Mark Andrews is the tight end 11 this year. On the other hand, his usage really hasn't increased. He's not really on the field anymore. In fact, he was on the field for 49% of snaps in his last game. So
that matchup, though,
it is the best matchup, almost the best matchup of the week for tight ends. Him and Dalton Kincaid have the best matchups this week, and also the Vegas line 53 points over. So it should be a week where you feel comfortable starting him, even though you haven't continued to see the consistent production from Mark Andrews. T.J. Hawkinson had 5 points in his return. Plays the Jags this week. A good matchup for him as well. Maybe they're going to get him more integrated. Sam Laporta continues to be productive. However, you do get J-Mo back this week, and so we'll see how his targets sort out with J-Mo back. I would expect they're going to go back down. Kincaid hasn't really done a ton this season, but he is playing the Colts. It's a pretty good matchup, so I think you have to consider starting him. And then Hunter Henry is a top 12 tight end in the year. He has the Chicago Bears. It is worth keeping in mind that the Chicago Bears, this game is only 38.5 total points in the Vegas line, so it is projected to be a low-scoring game, as most Patriots games will be. There's going to be some risk in that starting Patriots tight ends and starting Patriots players in general, but including Hunter Henry. So,
yep. Cole Kmet at the top of the C tier playing New England. A neutral matchup for him. We'll see if he can haul in a touchdown or 2. He's done that before. Taysom Hill, anyone's guess when he's going to go crazy. If you know, please let us know. We would love to know every single week when he is and isn't going to do something. Dennis Allen obviously being fired. We don't know if that's neutral, a positive, or a negative for just the overall operations in New Orleans and how that'll affect everyone. Pat Freiermuth and Dallas Goedert will be at the tail end of this tier as well. Pat Freiermuth taking on Washington. Dallas Goedert taking on Dallas. Both neutral matchups. Nothing really crazy friendly or crazy negative for either of those guys. Dallas Goedert, you may want to bump up your rankings a little bit if A.J. Brown is going to be limited or doesn't play this week for whatever reason. He was banged up last week. But again, expect both of these guys to kind of be last resort starting options if you're streaming tight ends.
Let's jump over and finish with QBs. You got the 4 rushing quarterbacks in the S tier here. You have Jaden Daniels moving down below Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow has the best matchup, the best Vegas line of the week. It's the best quarterback situation of the week goes to Joe Burrow, so he's going to be here in the S tier this week with Daniels, Allen, Jackson, and Hurts, who all have rushing upside as well. So tough matchup for Daniels, by the way, this week, but you're still starting him.
Yep. A tier, we're going to have Goff and Purdy up top, just ahead of Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had a really disappointing week last week against Chicago. In fairness, he didn't have to do anything. That offense in the passing game hardly had to do anything at all because Chicago just self-destructed and they did everything on the ground. So that was a pretty easy win for them. Didn't really need anything from those receiving assets or Kyler. I think he should be fine, and his rushing upside is still relevant to have him in the A tier. Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, and Baker will be at the tail end of this tier. Every single one of them provides a crazy amount of passing volume. They have so many weapons around them. I guess with the exception of Baker, who just continues to be productive. But with Cousins and Darnold, it's not even a question. These guys, Kirk Cousins just looks better and better every single week. He looks so good.
Yeah.
And Baker is going to continue to be in this tier until he stops producing, even with no one on the field.
This little baby tier here is going to be Mahomes, who actually has had a couple good games now. Matt Stafford, who plays the Dolphins. It's a tougher matchup this week, but he has been productive, and he does have his wide receivers back. And then Bo Nix. Bo Nix we're going to put here at its consensus 14. Bo Nix is a quarterback one right now on the year, so don't be afraid. Bo Nix is a pretty good option to stream. He has the Chiefs
on
this
the
week.
year, I think.
Yeah, he has the Chiefs this week, so it's a little bit tougher matchup. That's why he's lower in our rankings, but he is somebody that's been very productive. So
yep. C tier is going to be a little bigger here. CJ Stroud and Tua up top. Tua has just not been that crazy productive. Again, a lot of this is due to Achane just going crazy. CJ Stroud is like QB 17 on the year. His name value is a lot higher than his fantasy value right now. He is just really, really suffering from the amount of injuries that they have. And even with Diggs and Nico, when they were all healthy, he wasn't even being that ultra productive. Mixon has just been such a stud on the ground. Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence, and Drake May, I want to mention here. Every single one of those guys has legitimate rushing upside. Jones has a friendly matchup against Carolina. Trevor Lawrence coming off a 2 rushing touchdown game. He's QB 11 on the year right now, which is pretty impressive given how bad the Jags have been offensively. Drake May had a rough matchup against the Titans last week, still was able to post 17 points in a game where he didn't even look that great. But Chicago this week, we'll see what he can do. Caleb Williams, again, going to be very hit or miss. You just don't know with him any given week. And then I'll take the last 3 here as well in the D tier. Just close it out with Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and Justin Herbert. They all have a decent amount of passing volume, no rushing upside. We'll see what they're able to do. Russ and the Steelers have Washington. Rodgers has Arizona. Herbert has Tennessee. The toughest matchup of those 3 would be Herbert with Tennessee, which is why he's going to be last in this D tier.
And there you go. That's the Ultimate Rankings for this week. So like I said, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed if you enjoyed the Ultimate Rankings. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you later.